Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little video and go into this topic once again that did pique my particular interest. And for those of you overall that have not been paying attention to that of the boxing scene or the boxing news as of lately, and if you haven't heard the news, one of the bigger fights of the year was recently announced within that of the past couple of weeks. And in my opinion, even though with how many big fights there is potentially happening this year, of course, there is the potentiality of Vasily Lomachenko versus Devin Haney, Gervonta Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia. Hopefully, we get to see the setup matches of Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk if that fight does potentially happen. Also, as well, Terrence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr., but you just never know with that personal fight, within how the negotiations have went. We'll see what happens with that. And of course, there's a multitude of other fights that I'm probably not mentioning. Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez, and a certain amount of other fights that could be very, very good. Teofimo Lopez versus Josh Taylor. All these great matchups so far are either happening or they've happened so far this year. Well, in my opinion, probably the matchup that I am personally the most excited about, probably the best matchup or the greatest matchup of the year, in my personal opinion, at least the one that I'm personally the most excited about, is this upcoming May 7th bout overall within the next couple of months between that of the Japanese monster, Mr. Naoya Inoue, or Naoya Inoue, however you pronounce his name, and Mr. Steve Coolboy Fulton, if that's how you also pronounce his name. Mr. Inoue, of course, overall looked at as one of the top pound for pound fighters within the sport of boxing, and I would tend to agree with that. And some of you, in a certain amount of people's eyes, they may believe, all in all, or you may believe, that Inoue actually is the top pound for pound fighter and number one in all the sport of boxing. And I'm going to talk about in this video what this fight means for both gentlemen, in my opinion, because it is a colossal fight, in my opinion, for both of their careers, especially for their pound for pound acclaim. What both fighters, in my opinion, are somewhat going to have to do, and also, in my opinion, where their pound for pound ranking status is as of right now. And I'm going to go into a deeper analyzation within this video because in the past I've overall broke this down, and certain people, especially Naoya Inoue fans, they've overall got in my comment section and they've said, I don't think that you give Inoue enough respect. I don't think that you give him enough credit. And I think certain people, and I could be wrong about this, maybe they just disagree personally with my breakdown of potentially what could happen or overall about some of the faults that I may see about both fighters. But certain people overall, they say, I don't think that you really give Mr. Inoue enough credit. And certain people may just believe that I think that Naoya Inoue or Naoya Inoue, that he's just another brawler. And I don't think that he is. I think that he's a great all-around skilled boxer. I think that he is a superb and an exceptionally skilled fighter, a greatly skilled fighter. However, when we start having the conversation about Mr. Inoue potentially being the number one pound for pound fighter on the planet, just like I talk about with Mr. Terrence Bud Crawford, and just like I talk about with certain other fighters that, in my opinion, are lacking a little bit in terms of the resume department. And when I say resume, I'm not talking about the belts that you've won. I'm not talking about the divisions that you've unified. I'm not talking about overall your skill set or anything like that. What I'm talking about is the level of competition that you have beaten in the ring. And do I believe, all in all, that you have been in there with A-grade fighters that can legitimately challenge you in the ring? True 50-50 matchups, or if not 50-50 matchups, true fighters that they have a very, very diverse skill set, and they're very, very decent. They're A-grade, as you would call them, and they could potentially challenge you. Now, just because a fight is not 50-50 doesn't mean that it's not an A-grade fight. Floyd Mayweather Jr. was in plenty of A-grade fights where a lot of people overall, they truly thought that he was the mega favorite. I'm sure the same thing happened with Manny Pacquiao, and I've also seen it with Canelo Alvarez and a little bit of Vasily Lomachenko and some of these other guys. The problem with Mr. Inoue that I see, and what's keeping him from the possible number one pound for pound spot, and I've also said this in the past, I do not even personally have him within my top five. Now, if you're talking about just pure accomplishments, if you're talking about pure dominance, and even skill set and a certain amount of other things, sure, Mr. Inoue could be debated as a top five pound for pound fighter. But there's a reason overall why I kind of wait on that distinction. There's a reason why I kind of wait on that title overall until I see a true 50-50 fight that I believe. because there's a lot of people that in the past that believe that certain boxers, that boxer is obviously top 5 pound for pound. But when they finally got into the ring with a fighter overall that was actually going to stand up to them, and a fighter on the know that was going to be a true 50-50 challenge, or maybe this fighter on the know it wasn't going to be so easy for him, sometimes it hasn't happened that way. A lot of people favored Gennady Golovkin to win both Canelo Alvarez fights, and I thought that he won the first Canelo Alvarez fight. But in the second fight, Canelo Alvarez ended up being victorious when it came down to it. A lot of people overall thought Diego Corrales was going to beat that of Floyd Mayweather Jr. Floyd Mayweather Jr. ended up completely dominating him. All right, so it just is what it is. These just happen in certain matchups. Deontay Wilder. A lot of people took a look at him and they said, well, look how dominant he is. The man is knocking everybody out. The man overall is 40-something-0, and the man has like 38 knockouts. You know, he has the best knockout percentage overall in boxing history. How could this man not be one of the top pound-for-pound fighters? But then when he got in the ring with Tyson Fury, he was completely outboxed. Now, some people overall, they may say, you know, are you insulting Inoue's boxing intellect? Are you insulting overall his boxing ability? Are you saying that Inoue is overall as clumsy as Deontay Wilder in the ring? That's not what I'm saying at all. But there's been plenty of fighters that have been looked at as one of the top skilled pound-for-pound fighters, and against overall that of lower tier opponents, they can look absolutely fantastic. Mike Tyson, for example, was a very all-time greatly skilled fighter, but every single time that he got in the ring with a true fighter that could actually challenge him, he ended up losing that matchup. And I need to see if Mr. Naoya Inoue, if he is going to beat someone like that of a Stephon Fulton. Because there's no offense against the fighters that he's fought or the resume that he has. This is just my personal opinion, and a certain amount of his fans and a certain amount of people have disagreed with me. I have not seen one fighter on his resume, in my opinion, that really is close to the same level of a Stephon Fulton. And some people overall may disagree with me, and some people clap back and they say, well, can you say the same thing about Stephon Fulton? Who really has he fought? And, you know, that's somewhat of a fair point. But the conversation about Mr. Inoue is that he is potentially the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. And if he ends up winning this fight, in my opinion, he truly could be debatably the undisputed number 1 pound-for-pound fighter with what he's already accomplished. Like I said, Inoue is very similar to that of Terence Bud Crawford in that regard. Two fighters that, in terms of skill set and dominance, you could easily debate pound-for-pound wise, they're up there with anybody. But in terms of resume, no, you can't debate them up there with that of a Canelo Alvarez. You can't debate them up there overall with that of an Errol Spence Jr. You can't debate them up there with that of an Alexander Usyk or that of a Tyson Fury. You can't debate them up there with those fighters. Or even, if we're going to really talk about it, a Dimitri Bivol and overall an Artur debatably. You know, and once again, in my opinion, for you to debatably be my number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, I need to see you at a time when you are looked at as a clear A-grade fighter, not earlier on in your career to where we're still figuring out your level, like when Gervonta Tank Davis beat Jose Pedraza, or when Terence Bud Crawford beat Yuriorkis Gamboa. I need to see you when you are potentially that next level superstar, and you get in the ring with potentially another next level superstar, and you end up winning that fight. That, in my opinion, is the true key to becoming the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. And I'm sorry, I have just not seen Mr. Naoya Inoue. I have not seen him in the ring with that type of fighter until this upcoming May 7th. So like I said, this is truly going to be a true test for Mr. Naoya Inoue. And overall, this is going to see if he is with that crowd of the Canelo Alvarez's, the Alexander Usyks, the Tyson Furies, when it comes down to it, because those are the 3 fighters that come to mind when you talk about true 50-50 matchups that I've seen them in. Errol Spence Jr., you could debate it as well. When it comes down to it, Dimitri Bivol, maybe a couple of other fighters that I'm not currently listing at the current moment in time. And some people may say, well, why don't you bring up Terence Bud Crawford? Why don't you bring up Devin Haney? I don't think that those guys, even in some of their biggest matchups, I just never really seen those fights as true 50-50 fights. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't deserve credit. But in my opinion, I've already seen Canelo Alvarez have his battle with Gennady Triple G Golovkin when that was looked at as a fight that Canelo Alvarez more than likely was going to lose. Once again, for you to be my number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, you have to be in the ring with someone all in all to where, you know, and at the end of the day, you can say, you know what, that was looked at as a true 50-50 test. That was looked at as a generational fight, and I came out on the other end victorious. overall. So Canelo Alvarez can claim that he's been in the ring with guys like Gennady Golovkin, and he pulled out victoriously in that of the rematch, especially now the first fight, I thought that he lost. But the second fight, he ended up pulling out when it came down to it, and a multitude of other fights as well. You know, Mr. Vasily Lomachenko can claim that he had that win over Guillermo Rigondeaux, and maybe a couple of other fighters, even if you want to go there, maybe like a Gary Russell Jr., but maybe mainly the Guillermo Rigondeaux fight. Alexander Usyk can claim that he has that win over AJ Anthony Joshua, where a lot of people did not believe that he was going to win that fight. And there were certain people that were predicting AJ to win both fights, and Usyk was able to pull out in that fight. Tyson Fury, and a lot of people have disagreed with me with his, pound for pound ranking on my list. Listen, at the end of the day, it's like this. Tyson Fury can claim that his resume, especially for his weight division, is pretty much almost up there with anybody. Now, is he ever going to be, is his resume ever going to be as dynamic probably as that is a Canelo Alvarez's or Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s or anything like that? No, probably not, but no heavyweight in the history has resumes that are ever going to be as, broad as theirs or, overall as many fighters with as many divisions, because they can only fight in one weight division. They can't move down. Tyson Fury is a guy that is 6'9", 270, 280 pounds, so he can only beat who he can beat in the heavyweight division. And Tyson Fury, whether people want to admit it or not, he's been in two fights, two generational fights against two generational type of fighters where certain people did not think that he was going to win either fight. Vladimir Klitschko was favored against him. He completely outboxed him. He was not favored against Deontay Wilder. I believe overall in that first fight, he taught Deontay Wilder mainly a boxing lesson, and he did it even better in the last two fights. Inoue has not yet been in those type of fights, but he's about to be. So like I said, we're going to truly see how great Inoue and also Mr. Stephen Fulton actually is. And that's why, as of yet, I cannot claim that Mr. Naoya Inoue is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. But anyways, Mr. AKHi TV is going to give his short little breakdown overall about both of these fighters. I'm going to give my little analyzation as well. And let's get straight into it.
Breaking news, it's official. Fulton versus Inoue on May 7th in Japan. This is one of the most significant fights in boxing, and a fight you guys do not want to miss. This is must-see TV.
I agree. I think that this matchup, to be quite honest with you, so far, at least from what I know, is the best matchup of the year. And once again, the reason why I say that is because I'm so purely excited to truly see this fight. Because Mr. Inoue, in my opinion, is a superbly skilled boxer. He is an excellent skilled boxer. But I think that Stephen Fulton also is a superb skilled boxer and an excellently skilled boxer as well. And it's going to be very interesting to see if Mr. Inoue, or Inoue, however you pronounce his name, but I believe it's Inoue. If I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. But I believe overall that Inoue, he is going to be potentially in for a very tough fight. That's not me necessarily saying that I think 100% he's going to lose, and I'm not really going to reveal who I think 100% is going to win until about the week of the fight, or maybe a couple weeks before, the fight night is about to happen. This is not going to be my full breakdown, but I do think that both fighters, they're going to have to fight in a particular style to mainly take advantage overall of maybe certain weaknesses or certain advantages that they may have overall within that of the fight. Or to take advantage of certain weaknesses that maybe the other fighter may have. And on top of that, in a way, he is now going up in his fourth weight class. Stephen Fulton is going to have about a 3 or 4 inch reach advantage over him. He's going to be bigger. I think that in a way, when you even take a look at him compared to Emmanuel Rodriguez and Enlito Donaire at bantamweight, I thought that he looked a little bit small there. So Stephen Fulton, if I had to guess, more than likely, he's either around the same size or probably around the same build, if not even a little bit bigger. And Stephen Fulton was able to handle a decently big 126-pounder or whatever weight division that he's at in Brandon Figueroa, someone that had a decent amount of power and a very awkward, pressured style. So it's going to be very interesting once again to see how Inoue handles the size, handles the boxing IQ, and overall handles that type of fight. Because Canelo Alvarez was able to do it against Gennady Golovkin. Overall, when it came down to it, Tyson Fury, he was able to do it against Klitschko, and that overall against Deontay Wilder. Now, of course, no one's really bigger than that of Tyson Fury. But at the end of the day, once again, what I mean is the generational fights. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. This could truly be the key, in my opinion, to Mr. Inoue debatably being up there, at least on the path to continually going to all-time great status. We'll see what happens, because if he wins this fight, this is a very, very great win.
This is a 50-50 fight on paper. However, according to old media, Inoue is the heavy favorite because he's boxing pound for pound #1. Therefore, they expect Inoue to.
And as you can tell by AKHi TV, he's very annoyed with certain overall stances that people are saying that Mr. Inoue or Inoue, overall, that he is allegedly the #1 pound for pound fighter. Which is very particularly interesting once again, because AKHi TV is the same guy that alleges that Terrence Bud Crawford is the #1 pound for pound fighter. And Terrence Bud Crawford and Mr. Inoue, neither of them have ever avoided a fight in their career. Both of them are extraordinarily skilled, and both of them have unified their division completely. Both of them are three-weight division champions. And neither of them really have ever had a fight against that one fighter that was ever really a superstar level fighter when it came down to it. But yet, one was within the top 5 pound for pound, or debatably the #1 pound for pound fighter, and yet another one is not. I just find that very particularly interesting. And like I said, when Inoue was going to start getting the #1 pound for pound claim, you were going to start to see new media and Dante's Boxing Nation and a lot of these channels, you were going to start to see them attack Mr. Inoue and try to degrade his resume. And let me also state this. I can't completely disagree with some of their claims because, like I said, I don't think Inoue has the strongest resume either. And I'm sorry, but I just don't see beating a 37-year-old and a 40-year-old Nonito Donaire, even when he did get some decent wins at the bantamweight division. I just don't see that as a complete A-grade win, and a lot of people, of course, have disagreed with me. And they came up with the point, oh, what are you talking about, Nonito Donaire? You know, he was a former top 3 or top 5 pound for pound fighter. That's great, but that was damn near 10 years ago, if not over 10 years ago. The last time Nonito Donaire was looked at as a top 10 pound for pound fighter was when he lost to Guillermo Rigondeaux. And if we're really going to go there with Nonito Donaire, I don't think that Nonito Donaire, even in his prime of primes, I don't think that he ever would have beat a fighter like Mr. Inoue in my view, because Donaire was always a little bit more limited than what a lot of people would like to admit. And that's why when he got in the ring with certain A-grade fighters, like that of a Guillermo Rigondeaux or even a Nicholas Walters, but especially Guillermo Rigondeaux, who was probably a little bit undersized compared to that of Nonito Donaire, because Donaire was actually bigger than him. It looked by a decent amount, at least in terms of weight, when it came down to it. Guillermo Rigondeaux didn't only win the fight, he completely dominated Nonito Donaire. There was only one round I think I gave Donaire in that fight, and that was the round that he knocked Guillermo Rigondeaux down in. And then Guillermo Rigondeaux got back up and pretty much continued to whoop his ass. So it just is what it is. Nonito Donaire, in my opinion, always was more limited than what a lot of people really overall ever wanted to admit. So not only did I believe that Nonito Donaire, I never truly believed that he was an A-plus skilled fighter to begin with when it came down to it. And he certainly, in my opinion, was not an A-plus skilled fighter or an A-grade level fighter, in my opinion, at least not 100%, when he already had about 5 losses on his resume. You're talking about the same fighter once again that got completely dominated by Carl Frampton. And Carl Frampton was never a bad fighter. In fact, in my opinion, you could debate formally that he was a top 10 pound for pound fighter. But Nonito Donaire once again had suffered already a multitude of losses. Yes, he had certain wins overall against undefeated fighters or decent fighters in that of the bantamweight division. But he also had a multitude of losses in some of his bigger fights, like the Nicholas Walter fight and the Carl Frampton fight and some of those other fights. And you can claim that was when he moved up the weight classes. But if you're debating that Nonito Donaire is clearly an A-grade fighter, then he should have at least been able to win some of those fights. I don't understand how you're clearly an A-grade fighter and then you can win none of the big fights or the clear A-grade fights that you were in, even just moving up one weight division. In my opinion, that just doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, no, Nonito Donaire was not a clear A-grade fighter. Either time Inoue beat him. That doesn't mean, although, that he still didn't beat a decent fighter or a very good fighter or even a borderline great fighter, but not really an all-time great fighter or a clear A-grade name. Emmanuel Rodriguez, another very good name on his record. But is Emmanuel Rodriguez truly a great fighter? In my opinion, no, he's not. He's a very good fighter, and of course, he was a champion. But certain people, of course, whenever they try to defend certain resumes that they can see also are not up to par, they always like to say, oh, well, they were champions, and every champion is decent, and every fight is a tough fight. No, I can't necessarily agree with that. There are levels to different types of champions. And if I'm going to say the same thing about Terrence Bud Crawford, when he beat Julius Ndongo and Jeff Horn and Victor Postol, because in my opinion, none of those fighters were true A-grade fighters. If I'm going to say the same thing about Terrence Bud Crawford or Demetrius Bubu Andrade or Jamal Charlo, I also have to say the same thing about Mr. Inoue. If I'm saying it about one fighter, I have to keep the same standards everywhere else. And do I see Emmanuel Rodriguez and Onito Donaire and Jamie McDonald and Payano, do I see these guys as true A-grade fighters? No, I don't. No, I don't. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. All those guys that Inoue beat, they're about a B. Maybe Emmanuel Rodriguez, you could debate, in my opinion, is about an A-minus win. Some people may debate him a bit higher, but I'm not quite sure if I would debate him much higher than about an A-minus. He was a decent boxer, but is he a Steve Fulton? In my opinion, no, he is not. Now, of course, talking about Steve Fulton, I don't think that he's ever truly beaten an A-plus level fighter either, but one could debate that Brandon Figueroa fight was a bigger win than any of the wins in Naoya Inoue's career. One could debate it.
Wash Fulton, according to their standards, that they hold Inoue to or hype him up to. However, I'm here to tell you.
And as you see there, overall, AKHi TV put in overall the little jab there and says, hype him up to. And basically what AKHi TV is saying with that statement is, here we go again, overall with another fighter for the complexion, for the protection on the pound-for-pound list, overall on the hope list, another fighter that's being ranked as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, overall just another hype job. That pretty much is what AKHi TV is somewhat saying. However, once again, if Mr. Inoue, I don't think there's any doubt that he's a very decently great fighter. But if Inoue does win this fight, the question is new media going to debatably claim that he's the #1 pound-for-pound fighter? Because no PEDs have ever been caught in his history. That's certain things that they use with that of Canelo Alvarez, which is understandable. If you use the PED, point overall, I don't have a problem with that. But then don't have any PED users on your pound-for-pound list. People overall love to see, say all this shit about Tyson Fury and Canelo Alvarez and all this other shit. Oh, well, I don't have them within my top 5 because they're PED users. Well, don't have them on your top 10 pound-for-pound list at all then. Because certain people always tell me overall, oh, well, I don't have them, within my top 5. Well, you can't just use that excuse for several years because really, to be quite honest with you, once again, most of these athletes and most of these fighters are on something anyway, to be quite honest with you. Now, that's not really me using an excuse, but if you're just going to use that as an excuse overall to say, oh, well, you know what, I just don't personally like this fighter, so even if he does win against the A-grade fights, I'm always going to have the excuse in my back pocket that he had steroids, so that's why he's never going to be #1 pound-for-pound. And that's why if you don't want PED users on your pound-for-pound list, you can't put them on there at all. Period. It just is what it is.
Otherwise, I predict that Fulton will beat Inoue at all means necessary. I believe that Fulton will show that he's on another level than Inoue. So come fight night, we shall see. However, you guys and old media need to keep that same energy when it comes to labeling Inoue as pound-for-pound #1 and give Fulton his credit once he gets the job done.
Well, Mr. AKHi TV, I agree with what you're saying there, but let's also be a little bit real here. You guys need to keep the same energy too. And that's a big part of the reason why I like to review these guys' videos, because I don't think all their points are necessarily bad, and I don't disagree with some of their points, but it's also very clear that it's mixed in with a lot of bias and shit all in all that they don't really know what the hell they're talking about, or certain shit that they're clearly lying about, or to where there's double standards, or they don't treat everyone over without the same standards. Because basically the way that new media or the pro-black media, basically, let's just be real, it is what it is. Some people have a problem when I use that term. I don't mean to offend anybody. But at the end of the day, that's what they are. That's what their objective is to make sure, even if certain fighters do possibly, like Inoue or Canelo Alvarez or non-black American fighters, even if they do possibly deserve to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, they're going to make sure that they're debatably not there. And they're going to try and levy an attack on their resume and their record. That's why they go after Canelo Alvarez and some of those other fighters so harshly. Because they understand that those guys, in a lot of people's opinions, are looked at as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. And the reason why they tear down Canelo Alvarez on a constant basis is because they know that he's the overall threat to usually the #1 pound-for-pound spot. Because they know damn well that Canelo has an all-time great resume. They know that he has a great resume. Once again, they always claim with Canelo that he's avoiding this guy and that he's fighting this bum. But every time a former opponent of Canelo Alvarez is about to fight a fighter that they like, all of a sudden it's a big A-grade fight. That's not a coincidence.
Not least, Inoue has all my respect and all the fans' respect, win or lose. Just the fact that he accepted to fight Fulton, unlike the Virgil Ortiz, the Ramirez, the Teofimo Lopez, the Pitbull Cruz, the Bam Bam Rodriguez, the Williams Abedas, the Munguias, and Canelo Alvarez, who always duck the best fighters to cherry pick.
Well, no, Canelo Alvarez doesn't always duck the best fighters. Canelo Alvarez has been fighting normally the best competition for a very long time. And even with Teofimo Lopez, even though there's certain fights that you can argue that he was not interested in, I can't really go after him too much because right now he's about to face the best 140 pounder in the world. I believe about his third fight at 140 pounds. So I'm going to give the kid a little bit of a break. I can't really overall go after him too much for going after Josh Taylor, which is something that Gervonta Tank Davis could have done overall with the amount of yapping that comes from his mouth, but he never overall put that into action. It's very funny that they like to talk about a certain amount of these other fighters, and don't get me wrong, I certainly agree with a certain amount of the fighters that he put on his list. Of course, besides Canelo Alvarez mainly, and overall also that of Teofimo Lopez, at least at the current moment in time. But what's also interesting? They never bring up fighters like a Gervonta Tank Davis, who avoided Vasily Lomachenko for about 2 or 3 years. And every time Lomachenko's name was brought up from Floyd Mayweather Jr., Gervonta Tank Davis would piss his pants overall like a 4-year-old at a sleepover when it came down to it. They never mentioned Jamal Charlo. That same Jamal Charlo that's not interested in facing Demetrius Bubu Andrade or David Benavidez, when it comes down to it, or certain other fighters, that same Jamal Charlo, that purposely has avoided David Benavidez ever since that he called him out, that same Jamal Charlo. When it came down to it, they never overall mentioned those fighters or certain other fighters that they want to protect when it comes down to it, especially Black American fighters. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the fighters, once again, that he mentioned, they have avoided certain fights. But once again, it's just very particularly interesting to me which fighters they decide to mention and which ones they don't.
Unlike them, Inoue is a true champion, win or lose. Just the fact that he want to fight the best and prove himself is enough for me. We just want to see the best fight the best.
Well, the real question with you, AKHi TV and new media, quote unquote, overall, because they're allegedly truth tellers and they're completely unbiased, at least that's overall what they say. Once again, I'm going to be very interested to see where Mr. Naoya Inoue, I'm going to be very interested to see where he ranks on their top pound per pound list. Because Mr. Inoue, if he ends up beating that of Stephen Fulton, a guy that they already have top 10 pound per pound, I personally do not have him top 10 pound per pound when it comes down to it because I think that he hasn't accomplished enough. I have Inoue within my bottom 5. Once again, I'm going to be very interested to see when it comes down to it that where they rank him because not only should he be top 5, he should be debatably right there with anybody. Terrence Bud Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., when it comes down to it, because how many of those fighters can claim on the know that they've defeated another top 10 pound per pound fighter that was undefeated? Terrence Bud Crawford can't claim that when it comes down to it. And you can maybe even say that Errol Spence Jr. cannot personally claim that. Even though, of course, he beat Mikey when he was a top 10 pound per pound fighter. But that clearly was when Mikey was a bit smaller, if you want to maybe say that. So like I said, I'm going to be very interested.
As if that's too much to ask. However, we just happen to be in a sport where fighters some way somehow got abracadabra into being ducks. All thanks to fighters following Canelo Alvarez duck print. But not in.
And once again, mentioning Canelo Alvarez, and a certain amount of people always mention in my comment section, wow, these guys really always mention Canelo Alvarez. You know why that is? Because they understand that he's the main threat. It's always like a certain amount of people when they want to tear down Floyd Mayweather Jr., they always mention his name overall whenever they can because they realize how truly great that he actually is. That's the main reason overall why that is. And that's not me saying that Canelo Alvarez, that there's not been certain fights that should have happened in his career that has not happened. But Canelo has fought a repeated amount of A-grade fighters. That is very clear. But just to talk overall about the analyzation of this fight, who do I personally believe is going to win? I'm going to more break that down with my full analysis, but what I am going to say is this to be a little bit more clear within the second part of this video. or the third part of this video, maybe, the final 1/3, whatever you want to call it. Certain people overall, once again, when I talk about Inoue, especially compared to Stephon Fulton, certain people overall, they say, oh, I don't think you're giving him enough respect, or you clearly overall don't watch that much of Mr. Inoue, or he defeated, better champions than what you're giving him credit for. Listen, what I'm going to say is this, and I've said it repeatedly. In my opinion, in Mr. Naoya Inoue, if he is going to beat that of Stephon Fulton, he's going to have to try to do what Roberto Duran did to that of a Sugar Ray Leonard. And some people have asked me the question, well, why overall would you say that? Because Inoue, he can box. He can box on the back foot. He can box on the front foot. I'm not saying that Mr. Inoue overall cannot box. That's not what I'm saying. But there are a certain amount of fighters on the know that can fight in a multitude of ways. But against that one fighter that is exceptional in that one style, you probably would not want to prefer to fight in that main style. And Inoue is a great all-around boxer. He can box well on the outside. He can box well in mid-range. He can box very well up close. He can box in any dimension that he wants to. But at the end of the day, Stephon Fulton is very, very good on the back foot. He's very slick. He's decently speedy. He's a guy that is going to have a 3-inch reach advantage over that of Naoya Inoue. He's also going to be heavier. And more than likely, all in all, his shots, his power is going to affect Inoue possibly more than what other fighters have in the past. And certain people overall, they may say, what are you talking about? Stephon Fulton, he's not a guy that has a great amount of power. Well, he has enough power overall to keep you basically off of him, or he has enough power overall to keep you sorry, or overall to whatever the saying is. I can't really overall come up with it right now. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I'm missing it. He has enough power overall to basically keep you disciplined, to keep you back if he needs to. And in a way, once again, I thought that he was a bit small, even compared to that of Emmanuel Rodriguez and Onito Donaire, who pretty much are natural bantamweights. So Stephon Fulton, it's going to be very interesting to see how Inoue adjusts to that of the size of Mr. Stephon Fulton. And in my opinion, the best bet for Inoue to win the fight is to try and approach with a vicious body attack very early on. Use your feet all in all, like I said, to get in and out of the range. And certain people will say, well, I personally believe that in a way that he's going to completely fold over Stephon Fulton. I've had certain people tell me that they just personally believe that he's going to fold over Stephon Fulton like a lawn chair. And I just don't believe that that's personally going to happen. Do I also believe that Fulton, that he's going to fold over Mr. Inoue like a lawn chair? No, not necessarily. But what I will say is this, Inoue, in my opinion, even though a lot of the times he likes to box in the mid-range and he likes to move and use certain angles overall, and he's pretty good with his lateral movement, in my opinion, with Stephon Fulton being that of the bigger fighter, I don't think, in my opinion, that it's the best strategy to try and outbox Stephon Fulton, someone who's going to be lengthier than you and also very speedy as well. Even though I think Inoue has the hand speed advantage, I think that it would be smarter, in my opinion, especially with the type of power that he has, overall to keep his hands up, utilize that jab, utilize a double jab, sometimes a triple jab, try to cut overall Stephon Fulton off on the ropes. And when he tries to separate distance, because he overall judges distance very decently well, he's good in pretty much any dimension, just like Mr. Inoue when it comes down to it, and he knows how to separate distance. You can see that in that other Brandon Figueroa fight when it comes down to it. Then overall try to attack his body with a vicious amount of uppercuts overall, and then later on you can go to the head. It's going to be very, 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 very important, in my opinion, for Inoue, if he wants to win this fight, that he has to go to the body. When it comes to he has to go to the body, in my opinion, and usually he has a very good body attack. But in my opinion, if Inoue tries to waste his time, in my opinion, trying to outbox a fighter that's going to be a little bit bigger than him, when it comes down to it, and on top of that has a right cross that's very, very good, that might be able to get to Inoue, because Inoue, if there's one punch that he seems overall to get hit with a little bit more often, it does appear to be that of a right cross. And sometimes he does fall sucker to that of a pull counter of the right cross, especially when he throws his jab out there. So overall, we'll see what ends up happening with that, even though I wouldn't say it's a huge problem, but it has happened in the past. So he's going to have to be very, very careful. So in my opinion, in a way, his best bet is to go to the body early and really try to break him down. You're really going to have to try to make this a rough and tough fight, kind of like what Brandon Figueroa did. But what he can do differently than what Brandon Figueroa did is that he can use his feet to a better degree, because in my opinion, he has better feet overall than that of Brandon Figueroa, and he has quicker feet. He needs to move in and outside of the range, set up overall certain combinations, throw a lot of combinations to the body. And when Steve Von Fulton overall tries to tie you up, or when he overall tries to, get in there and kind of tries to muffle that of your offense, step back and unleash overall certain combinations or certain counters. But you are mainly, in my opinion, going to have to press that of Steve Von Fulton up against the ropes. Because if I'm Steve Von Fulton, I'm trying to keep Mr. Inoue in that other middle of the ring. I'm the bigger fighter. I'm heavier. I have a 3 to 4 inch reach advantage over him. I have a great jab and I have a great right cross. I'm great on the back foot. I'm great in mid range. I'm also great up close, but I can't compete with that of Inoue's power, at least overall, mainly, when it comes out. I'm not saying that Steve Von Fulton cannot, keep, Inoue honest. I guess that's the word that I was looking for, that he can't keep him honest. But when it comes down to it all in all, once again, Inoue more than likely, let's just say if this was a slugfest, more than likely Inoue is going to have the more power. Inoue, even when he's moving up the weight classes, has absolutely monstrous power. So he's overall going to have to be very, very careful overall with that Mr. Steve Von Fulton I'm talking about. And Steve Von Fulton, there's going to be certain times in the mid-exchange where he's going to have to keep his hands up a little bit more, and that he's going to have to use his feet at all times as well. Both of these fighters are going to have to use their foot movement to the greatest of degrees, but in a little bit of different situations. In my opinion, Fulton is mainly going to have to try to be on the back foot in this fight, but he's also going to have to at least push himself to the point to where he's going to have to try to keep this in mid-range. He can't retreat the whole entire time to where the point Mr. Inoue, he pretty much has him up against the ropes and he's beating him up, because in my opinion, that's not going to work out well. Inoue just has too much power. But Inoue, once again, even though he's a great boxer in the mid-range, once again, Fulton is the bigger man. And he's also, once again, the first fighter that Inoue has ever fought that has been on this level of skill and boxing IQ. So it's very important, in my opinion, that Inoue, that he pressures that of Steve Von Fulton and makes this a rough and tough fight as much as he can. Because if he tries to outbox Steve Von Fulton in the middle of the ring a lot, he may figure out that reach, he may figure out that the weight and that the skill of Steve Von Fulton, that it may be a little bit too much in that of the middle of the ring. And I could be wrong. Maybe Inoue, maybe he will completely outbox him in the middle of the ring. I don't personally believe that that's the best strategy. I think that the better strategy overall is to utilize your foot movement and overall to keep your hands up the majority of the time. Try to get Steve Von Fulton overall to counter overall and counter his counters, especially sometimes when he wings some of those punches out there, which oftentimes he's not really too irresponsible. But if you do show good defense at the beginning, and if you launch a good body attack and show that you can possibly wear him down over time, he might get a bit more desperate with his offense. Just a possibility. Just a possibility. But Steve Von Fulton, once again, is a very disciplined fighter as well. So this is going to be a very potentially tough fight for both of them. As for Steve Von Fulton, what do I personally believe that he is going to have to do? I think that Steve Von Fulton, once again, has to try to keep this fight in the mid-range. He has to utilize lateral movement the whole entire time. And he also has to show Mr. Inoue that he is not going to allow him to bully him. He has to show him all in all that he is not afraid of his power, and that he has power of his own, that he can hit him with a good right hand, or that he can hit him with that jab, that he can set up certain counters, and that he is not going to be completely petrified of his power. Because there are certain fighters that get in the ring with Inoue, and there are certain ones on the know, even that of a Nonito Donaire, and certain other fighters. Now, Donaire, to be fair, he was one of the ones overall that I've seen that really tried to fight back with Inoue. But some of these other fighters, when they feel that power, like his last fight against Paul Butler, some of these fighters overall, they really don't even get their offense off that much because they're so afraid of the type of power that Inoue is going to return back with. In my opinion, Steve Von Fulton, he's not going to be one of those fighters. He's always going to be looking for different angles, different types of answers, different types of counters and punches and combinations that he's going to be able to land, especially working off that lead jab, which is very crisp, very good when it comes down to it. And on top of that, that good right hand, which at times, in a way, sometimes can be a sucker for, just at least in certain stances. So he's going to have to be very, very careful. And once again, Steve Von Fulton, if he's going to win this fight, in my opinion, he needs to keep it in the middle of the ring. He needs to defend himself overall very decently well, keep his hands up a little bit more, because in certain circumstances, he is getting countered overall up against the ropes, because he maybe tries to throw a certain punch that maybe all in all could be performed a little bit better. It doesn't happen super duper often, but at times overall he can get countered. So he needs to be very careful. Don't stay up against the ropes too long. Utilize that great jab and utilize that right hand. It's a great fight in my opinion, and both fighters, in my opinion, have a great chance to win it. But both fighters are really going to have to utilize their strategy very well, because if they don't, it could be a dominant fight for the other fighter. I could easily, honestly see once again this fight truly going either way. If I had to favor anyone in particular to win the fight, I would probably overall go with that as Stephen Fulton, just because I think he's bigger. I don't know if Inoue all in all has ever experienced, when it comes down to it, a fighter that is on the same skill level. And the fact that Stephen Fulton has such a great jab and also such a great right hand, which Inoue has a little bit of a problem with sometimes, because he overall falls for that certain pull counter when it comes down to it, especially overall when he throws that jab out there, if he keeps it out there too long. And on top of that, the main weakness that I would see with Inoue is that sometimes his head is just a little bit too stiff. He doesn't necessarily have bad head movement, but sometimes he's caught in a little bit too much of the straight line. Sometimes his head does not move enough. So he's going to have to be very careful with that. I could easily see this fight going either way. I could see Inoue dominating this fight. I could see Stephen Fulton dominating this fight. But I believe more than likely that it's going to be a decently competitive fight in spots. But overall, once again, both fighters are really going to have to utilize their game plan to the best of degrees. And even though Inoue he can box great in the mid-range, and Stephen Fulton he can box great up close and personal, what Stephen Fulton, in my opinion, is going to have to do is that he's going to have to try and box in the middle of the range. He's going to have to try to stay out of Inoue's power zone the whole entire fight. And we'll see how well that works, because Inoue is extraordinarily quick. He's very quick, and he's a very great counter puncher. But once again, Stephen Fulton is going to have the best feet and the best boxing IQ and the best skills and the best slickness overall that Inoue has hands down ever seen in his career. Just my personal view. And as for Inoue, once again, he's going to have to be very careful of the movement and the jab and the right cross of that of Stephen Fulton. And in my opinion, he's going to probably want to fight the boxer a little bit more in this fight. He can box, in the mid-range as well as a lot of other fighters on the planet. No doubt about it. But you're fighting a fighter, once again, that is bigger. When you take a look at Canelo Alvarez versus Dimitri Bivol, for example, Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, in terms of skills, you can debate him up there with anybody in terms of the best fighter on the planet. But when you're fighting Dimitri Bivol, you don't want to try to fight Dimitri Bivol in the middle of the ring. What you want to try to do with Dimitri Bivol, if you're Canelo Alvarez, is that you overall want to attack that body early, and you want to overall make him lose confidence over time, at least if you can. Which is very hard, because he's a fighter that can go forward or go backward. He has great power, great speed, great athleticism, and of course great boxing skills and great boxing IQ. So Canelo Alvarez, if he's going to win that rematch, even though certain people will say, well, Canelo, of course he can box in the mid-range. He can box in any mid-range, or he can box in any range. Of course he can. But in certain fights, there's certain things that you're going to have to acquiesce to. And in my opinion, it's the same thing with Inoue. Inoue is going to have to box up close. He's going to have to try to be in his zone, but he utilizes his feet to move in and out of the zone at right times so he doesn't get hit with certain counters, or that he's so, that he's not too repetitive. And Stephen Fulton, he's going to have to keep himself in the mid-range, but also stand his ground at times, especially use that jab and that right cross. All right? So it is what it is, because Inoue, of course, a lot of the times does have a high guard. He has a good high guard, and it's usually not a negative, but see, all in all, if you can maybe blind him with that jab and get him with the right cross right down the pipe, because sometimes that's what happens with fighters that utilize the high guard a little bit too often. But we'll see what happens. Like I said, this is a tremendous fight. It's a tremendous overall fight that I believe is probably the best matchup of the year. And I could see either fighter winning, but I believe all in all that Stephen Fulton to win the fight is going to have to box in the middle of the ring or at a distance. I think that in a way that he's going to have to try to get up close and personal and really try to bully Stephen Fulton throughout the whole entire fight. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I just thought that I would give that little analyzation to explain myself a little bit more clearly, just so people overall get my point of view a little bit more. But that's really about it. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later, and we'll see where this fight goes from here.